Ladies and gentlemen, open banking pioneers, a very warm welcome to our first Campfire of the year. Beyond JROC, what's next for open banking in 2024? Well, I believe this year the stars are truly aligned for open banking, with the outcomes of the Joint Regulatory Oversight Committee, affectionately called JROC, providing the industry with our guiding North Star. Now, this isn't just in isolation, it's a constellation. There are other key industry initiatives that will shape the sector we work within. Each stand alone and each shines. To keep with the astrological theme, it's also on brand. See what I did there? Collectively, this is therefore an incredible galaxy. So we've the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, DDPI, which is basically the long-term regulatory framework for open banking that will pave the way for open finance and smart data even. And that is absolutely game-changing. We've also have the Payment Service Regulations Review, which is the government plans for the National Payments Vision. It really is a supernova year. And that is before we even start to mention digital identity and the work HMRC are delivering. There is so much good news. Then, if we may, just take a little look around the world. Every continent now has significant activity already underway. Just to touch on the USA for a moment. In collaboration with our partners, Oxford University and the UK government, we'll be delivering the Index USA. We'll be assessing the market impact and the opportunity for Section 1033 of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. In short, and hardly surprisingly, it's referred to simply as 1033. Now, there is good reason to understand the impact and the opportunity in the US, because that is the largest global economy by GDP. So, making it all relevant and returning to our campfire, why is the work of JROC so important? There are many reasons. Most of all, it impacts on everyone in our industry. Now, one key topic we'll be discussing today is around the sustainability of the commercial model. And we need a risk and liability framework. Now, maybe we can adapt some of the best of the card schemes. Now, having built and run a card issuer, these protections are must-haves for the customer. It's vital, absolutely vital, that we have a fair and equitable commercial model. And that means fair and equitable for everyone. Now, currently, the market conditions are challenging. We all know that it's tough. But there are many factors that are aligning that we can all leverage. And this is what we've all been waiting for. So I believe we just need to move at pace. And as you know, our rallying call is, come on, let's lace up our trainers. Now, open banking was born in the UK, and it's vital that we protect and retain our lead on the global stage. At OBE, we see from our audience, and we truly do, that others around the world still look to the UK for direction and inspiration. So panel, no pressure there then, hey? In a sector that's built on innovation, growth isn't abdicated to the regulators. Now, the voice and the actions of the industry are crucial. It's a collaborative and a consultative, if I can say the words, it's a collaborative and a consultative process, which is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so here we go. The team at OBE have worked very, very hard to carefully create a balanced and an independent conversation, so everybody watching can form their own views, develop their own strategy, and in a busy digital world, hear the facts from the people at the very heart of the conversation. So I am delighted today that our panel, we have a real stellar panel. It's hosted from Akila from the FT, who will be joined at the beginning for a fireside chat with Jane Moore from the FCA. It's absolutely brilliant that Jane will be joining us. This will be followed by what I can promise you will be a very, very lively debate with both regulators. So Jane is then joined by Kate Fitzgerald from the PSR. Now, there is so much to talk about that Kate could probably have a panel session all on her own. We've also got Henk from OBL. It simply just keeps getting better, doesn't it? Now, the future state of the entity is fundamental to how we go forward. So I'm looking forward to hearing more on that. And then we've two industry experts, Kat Cloud from Yodely and Stephen Wright from NatWest. Both of them have been absolutely instrumental in our sector and have been here from day one. Now, you've Slido at the side of your screen, so you can ask the panel any questions. We've a remarkable panel, so please do get involved. Akila, it is my absolute pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you very, very much, and welcome to the very exciting world of open banking. So without further ado, I am thrilled to pass the mic to two amazing females. Akila, over to you.
Thank you so much, Helen, and thanks for having me on my first Campfire chat. So Jane, thanks for being here with us. It's great to have you. I thought to start us all out, you could remind everyone why it is that open banking is so important to the FCA, and then remind everyone again of the roadmap and the vision you're working towards.
Thank you, Akila, and Helen, thank you for the introduction and for having us here today to talk about open banking, which is one of my favourite topics. So open banking is really important to the FCA because it has the potential to transform how people manage their finance and how they make payments. It has the potential to make a real difference in the payments world. And I hope that in the future, my children use open banking, and there have been all sorts of innovative products designed which completely change the environment. As Helen was saying, open banking has been a UK success story, and ensuring it continues to develop in the interest of consumers while promoting innovation and competition remains a priority for us. Obviously, as the FCA, consumer protection has to feature in there as well, but the potential for open banking is huge, and we really want to be able to develop it and to harness all the future potential so that the ecosystem can develop and that we can continue to be a UK success story. So turning to the roadmap, I'm sure you will have all read it. Back in April last year, JROC set out its roadmap for delivering the vision for the next phase of open banking. And that's got the key concept in it. Open banking needs to be safe, sustainable, and scalable, with an ecosystem that fosters trust and meets the needs of consumers and businesses. Now, each bit of that vision is hugely important, and we have, I think, 29 different work streams to deliver the next phase over a 2-year period. Now, we're almost a year in, and we have worked very hard on the various different work streams, and it is an ambitious but exciting challenge to get through the roadmap. It's not the regulators alone who are doing this. And I think one of the things I really want to stress is that we are really grateful for the support we've had from the ecosystem, and that we are working together. And the fact that you've all turned up to this event, I think, is really key to that. And the engagement that we've had and the working groups that we stood up last year has allowed us to progress work streams and to develop them. So the key message that I wanted to give for this bit is thank you, and please continue to work with us.
Great, thank you. And could you give us some insight about what is happening with a future entity and tell the audience?
Thank you. Yes, so for those of you who were members of the Future Entity Working Group, this is one of the working groups that I was saying was stood up last year and did a huge amount of work to consider how the future entity, the future central body that will be at the heart of the ecosystem should be developed. We set out in JROC a high-level vision for the future entity, that it has to be economically sustainable, equitably funded, and efficiently governed. And the Future Entity Working Group, there are around 30 industry participants from across the ecosystem who joined. And we had some really enjoyable meetings discussing some really difficult topics. We had 3 different subgroups, covering capabilities, governance and funding, and some really rich debate. So the Future Entity Working Group produced a document which is goes through a lot of considerations and makes recommendations to JROC, which JROC gratefully received last year. We are in the process of working through the next steps. Obviously, in the December publication, the update to the JROC workstreams that was published around the 18th of December, we set out the progress we've made on all the workstreams, but in particular for this question, the future entity. And we've committed to publishing a next paper in Q1 this year, setting out the next steps. But there was a lot of work done, and we are considering how the future entity should be designed, and how it can then take forward the work that will be key to the heart of the ecosystem in the future.
Great. And now could we talk about what I understand is another very hot topic for the industry? And could you please give us an update on the work and progress that's happening around VRP?
So I anticipate that this is one of the topics that Kate can give a whole hour presentation and discussion on, and I'm sure we will come to discuss it further in the panel session. So let me give a quick overview of VRP. So variable recurring payments. This is one of the other topics where there was a working group set up, and that was chaired by the PSR, by Kate. And there was an industry-led working group to develop a blueprint to establish the phased rollout of non-sweeping VRP. Now, VRP is an example of how open banking can develop for the future, how we can allow consumers, enable consumers and businesses to make a wider range of payments more convenient and more efficient. And the steps discussed by the VRP working group is a means of getting towards that answer. But there's still a lot of work to do over the course of this year. And there were a lot of recommendations to support further scaling by way of enhancement in functional capabilities, dispute processes, and various other items that we've taken on board, and we're setting out, as we said in the December papers, implementation groups to take this work forward so that we can really develop the right solution for the industry. The JROC is targeting a phased rollout of non-sweeping VRPs by the Q3 of this year, which will be upon us in no time at all, the way that the year is going so far. And we will aim to deliver a full rule set to enable a rollout of non-sweeping VRPs in 2025 after the pilot starts in phase 3 this year, Q3 this year. Once we've got VRP up and running, this isn't going to be the end of the journey though, and I just want to stress that it's simply the beginning of the journey. So we see VRP as a pilot to broader development of premium API propositions, and that will facilitate, incentivise ongoing innovation for the benefit of businesses and consumers. And this is really important to us so that we get this right now, so that we can have more innovation. I keep coming back to that word innovation. We're looking for new products within open banking to really take it forward, and to make it economically sustainable and scalable, and so that the ecosystem continues to grow and continues to deliver benefits for consumers across the UK.
Yeah, I'm sure the rest of the panel and Kate in particular will have a lot more to add to VRP, but could we also talk about the other themes that were set out by JROC and the other work streams? Could you give us a brief sort of update on all of those, or some of those?
Of course, I'm not going to go into the detail of all 29 different activities, but broadly there are 6 work streams, and we've touched on the VRP work stream and we've touched on the future entity already. So the other 4 are levelling up availability and performance, mitigating the risks of financial crime, developing proposals for dispute processes, and improving information flows to TPPs and end users. Now, a lot of the work on these work streams have been OBL-led, and they have all progressed. So under the first 2 work streams, JROC has welcomed OBL's submission of 2 data collection frameworks on API performance and financial crime. The submissions of data under this will really support our policy thinking, and we will use the data that comes to consider how, if any potential changes are needed in the future. So that data will be hugely important. OBL has also worked on a gap analysis of dispute processes in open banking under workstream 3, and a gap analysis of payment statuses and error messages in faster payments and open banking. We're considering the next steps to address the findings of these, and JROC will provide an update in due course.
Great. And before we move on to our panel session with everyone, could you please give us your one key message or takeaway for attendees today?
So I think the key message is one that I've already said. We need to develop open banking as an ecosystem. We need to all work together to get to the next stages, and to fully develop the potential of open banking. So my ask is for firms to continue to support the JROC work streams and the ones that OBL are driving forward as well, so that we can progress the JROC roadmap. So please respond to data requests, consultations, participate in working groups, and come and give us your thoughts. It's really helpful to have industry input at the right time while we are doing the policy work for this, so that we can get it right, and so that we can work together and that we can make open banking the best possible thing it can be. As Helen said, the constellation out there, we can make it shine.
Great, thank you. And I think, yeah, as you said, cross-industry collaboration is really key to this whole, ambition. And so I think it's a good time to start our panel session with everyone else. So we've obviously just heard from Jane at the FCA, which was great. And now we'd love to hear from Kate at the PSR, who could expand on what Jane has just updated us on and just kind of look back on the last year. Kate, would you like to give us your update?
Hi, Akila, thank you so much. And yes, brilliant. So Jane has already told us loads about the huge focus that we have had for the last year on making sure that we progress things for open banking as quickly as possible. Before I start, if I may, I would just like to give a little bit of colour to the PSR strategy and why open banking is so important to us in payments. So the PSR published its strategy 2 years ago now. 2 years ago now. So we have a 5-year strategy. And part of that strategy for UK payments is that we really improve choice and competition between payment systems. And the reason that we want that for the UK is because we genuinely think that through better competition, we can get better outcomes for consumers. So those outcomes might be better quality payments. They might also be better value payments. And for lots of reasons, competition is really at the heart of our strategy. We think open banking has an incredible opportunity to really help to provide that competition between payment systems. And so we think in the long run, actually, if we can get open banking payments to deliver for us some of the things that Helen was talking about right at the top of the call, some of those protections that we expect, for example, from card schemes, some of that, a sustainable commercial model, we actually think that's a route, a really good route to giving consumers better choice, better quality, and better price payments, for example, to merchants. So hopefully that helps to describe why we in the PSR are so passionate about making open banking payments work and so focused on the future of variable recurring payments, which is really, for us, a key stepping stone towards those broader use cases and that full retail transaction capability that we think there is potential for here. Shall I just talk a little bit more about what we did in the VRP working group, because we covered a lot of ground. in a short space of time. And I'm pretty sure, I'm just looking at Stephen, I'm pretty sure that Stephen will want to talk about this as well, because he was there throughout the challenges of the VRP working group with me. But we chaired the VRP working group because we wanted to really keep momentum going on some of those JROC aims that were published in the April document, as Jane talked about. And the VRP working group brought together a huge range of representation from across the whole ecosystem. And we had some pretty challenging discussions, actually. And we had some quite hard things to try and crack. And we had huge support from the industry, which was absolutely fantastic. Where that's left us now is in a position where actually in December we were able to publish not only the findings of that working group, so a great document which talks about what next for VRP and what can be done, also talks to a regulatory response to the work of the working group. And we in the PSR have then set out a JROC PSR consultation, which focuses on some of the sort of the harder, the thornier issues, where we think there is a need for regulatory assistance in getting to the next steps. Because whilst the VRP working group was able to do lots of really good work in understanding what needs to happen next, there were some areas where actually incentives just aren't aligned in the industry, and we just need a little bit of a regulatory push to kind of get things over the line. So that's our view. That's what's set out in the December consultation. Just to give a tiny bit more colour, I would just like to say that in the VRP working group, this is a first step, right? So, and I call it VRP Light, but we're focused now on getting live a set of use cases, which we think will be I'm loath to say simple, but let's just say a first step rather than a simple first step, which proves the concept of a wider VRP rollout. And those use cases focus on areas where there is already sectorial protection, sectorial regulation, which protects consumers from harm if things go wrong with a payment. So those are things like payments to government, central and local government, payments to regulated utilities, and payments to financially regulated firms. And we think by tackling those use cases first, we've got a really good potential to, one, take a big step forward. We already know there's tons of appetite for this. And two, really prove the case that VRP can work for us on a bigger set of use cases.
Great, thanks. It would be great to hear from Open Banking next. So, Henk, could you kind of give us your 2024 update and kind of share what's on your mind when you look back at the progress made in the last year?
Thank you. Sounds a bit like the Christmas Carol: the past, the present, the future. Thank you. And thank you for having me at the panel here too. So looking back, 2023 was quite a good year, of course, and I must say perhaps some three things on 2023. One is growth. I think it's very important to mention the growth we have seen in open banking. So 1 out of 6 SMEs are using now open banking, 1 out of 9 consumers. We have grown the payments by about 90% across the ecosystem as well. So some very good figures coming out. About 5,000 people work indirectly or directly in open banking sector, contributes about 4 billion to the GDP in the UK. So first message, I think, is in 2023. Long may it continue in this year as well, of course, growth. The second one is, of course, the amazing effort by the ecosystem. I would like to thank also, like Jane did, everybody for the input. And it started off with SWG early on last year, but also at the end for the JROC report. So thank you for all the inputs. And looking at the culmination of this, we've seen, through the DPDI bill being mentioned in the King's speech, also the, autumn statement to DPDI bill, you see there's a lot being talked about open banking in the industry. So we have a good result in terms of the promotion of open banking in the industry. And that culminated also into the Joe Garner report, where there's 10 recommendations for the future of retail payments. 4 out of 10 are to open banking, which means that we have a lot of work to do going forward as well, and particularly from 24. And then finally, 2023, as Jane was mentioning as well, OBL has led 4 work streams for JROC. And I must say we made a lot of progress. And, in the RAG rating, there would be a lot of green there in terms of how we are performing there. Looking forward to continue, of course, working with JROC on the next stage. That brings me into the present. We are 6 years young this week. So 15th of January, PSD2 was launched in 2018. So just to let you know how young this industry is and how much we already talk about things. So coming back to Kate's view on VRP, I think sweeping VRP was launched only less than 2 years ago. So can you imagine we're now talking, these working groups that Kate was leading on Workstream 5, you had some big names and big tech names around the table as well. So, and also the Rails themselves. So I'm not going to mention names, but it's amazing to see what traction is being created in open banking, not only on the data front, but also on payments. So very, very happy to say that we're 6 years young and not old. We're a young category, and a lot of collaboration is still required. Looking forward into 2024, I think for us, it's of course the build up to the future entity, and also the work we need to do there. So it's not only maintaining the order for us, which is our core mandate, but also looking forward in terms of how we then transition to that new entity. And I'm sure we can carry on talking about that as well, and perhaps another hour on future entity. But this is, of course, our role as well in terms of assuring to the CMA that the order maintains in the new world. And that's one of my jobs as well, of course, to assuring that on behalf of my trustee, Marianne King, as well. So that's quite important for us. And of course, any work stream we will lead in the future by JROC will be welcome, of course, for us to continue working on the future of open banking. So that's a bit for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And most importantly, happy birthday to open banking. Now, I think let's turn to the industry. So it'd be great if Kat and Stephen, you could go in turns. Maybe Kat, you can go first and give us your 2023 takeaway and the same kind of, update on what you're expecting for the next year.
Yeah, of course. So thank you so much for having me on the first Campfire of the year. And also thanks, Hank, for letting us know that it's been 6 years of this fun and hopefully many more. I think so for us, and Helen touched on it at the beginning, so InvestNet is a global company. So it was a very, very big year for us, 2023. Not only did we get 1033 in the US, which we have been waiting for many, many years, we also got to participate in the funding working group and the wider future entity working group, which really kind of helped to put pen to paper on, I think, a lot of the discussion topics and the side conversations that industry and the regulators have been having on the key things that we need to think about for the future entity in order to really progress from open banking to then start celebrating the sixth birthday for open finance. So it was really great to see that, have those discussions, and then just kind of come together as an industry in collaboration with the regulators and put pen to paper. So that was a really big win, I think, for us, as well as kind of the more global wins. And then for 2024, not to sound like a broken record, but we are also kind of looking forward to the future entity, looking forward to the future regulatory approach. So the DPDI bill, that will be a huge milestone. And I think, again, just getting that clarity to see that regulatory lever in the legislation that we're going to see and be, okay, open finance isn't something that we're going to continue theoretically talking about. We're going to have a clearer timeline. We're going to be able to sit down as industry, as regulators, and have a campfire like this, hopefully within 6 months or next year, and have clarity on what is this actually going to look like? What's the next step? How can we start engaging and starting to access data that's outside the scope of open banking? So that's kind of the big thing that we're looking for in 2024 in the UK. And then from a global perspective, as I said, 1033 is going to be a behemoth of a piece of work, but a very exciting and forward-thinking piece of work for us in the US.
Great. I think, Stephen, by now you know the question.
Yeah, what do I cover? Because I think everyone's pretty much covered everything. And also, thank you for inviting me today. I would totally agree about the points around industry collaboration on the VRP working group, the future entity working group, and also highlight kind of UK Finance's project on moral clauses for VRP. I think it was definitely a year of industry collaboration, but I also think it kind of demonstrated some of the challenges and timelines to industry collaboration. It takes a while to get going and getting a rhythm going and getting everyone on the same page and everyone happy. And we kind of need to ensure that as we get into 24, that kind of continues and doesn't break, because it takes a long time to get it restarted again. But looking ahead to 24, I agree with Kat. I'm excited about the DPDI bill and having a kind of future regulatory framework in place and seeing that kind of clarity on the prioritization of sectors for smart data and kind of timeline for that. I'd also very much welcome the setup of the future entity. And I think along with that, a funding model that actually sustains the development of open banking at the industry level going forward. I am excited about VRP this year. And as well as Kate's pilot for kind of Q3, it's also looking beyond that and as to what is the kind of sustainable economic model for VRP. Because I do think VRP and account-to-account payments, there is a long roadmap still for it to be a true competitor to cards for retail transactions, both e-commerce and point of sale.
Thanks, Stephen. This is the perfect segue into my next question, which is about VRP. So, I mean, we started the year with the consultation on the 15th of January, and we obviously heard from Jane earlier at the FCA. But Kate, could you please give us your update on what was agreed and the kind of next steps and priority pieces that were laid out? That would be great.
Sure. Yeah, so we opened our consultation in December. And that consultation is still live. So the most important thing I have to say today is that we really want to hear from you in response to that consultation. You've got until the 2nd of February. And so we want to hear about a number of things which we're very specifically consulting on. And I'll quickly go through those if I may. On the 15th of January, though, we did what we always do when we have these consultations, is try and make sure that everybody knows about it, that everybody's got a chance to talk to us through the consultation, and everybody's clear about what we're talking about. And with some of these things, they're quite complex. So actually having round tables like we did on the 15th of January is a good way to start that conversation. But we will always say to people, please come and talk to us. Please come and, give us your views. And that's a really important part of our consultation, as has been all of the working group work up to this point as well. But just to quickly outline what's in that December consultation document, the things we're really interested to hear about are thoughts on the commercial model for VRP, and alongside that, in particular, the pricing principles. So what we have set out in the consultation document is some views about what we think the pricing principles should be, and that is around a cost recovery model for VRP, and a set of pricing principles which allow us to be fair, transparent, and to promote competition. And the detail of that is in the document, so I would encourage you, everyone to have a look at that. So a set of pricing principles and a proposal for the commercial model, which allows costs to be recovered. Now, we're also saying in this consultation that actually our initial hypothesis for this set of use cases could be different to what needs to happen in future, and we're interested to hear about where the applicability of what we've proposed in that commercial model and people's thoughts on it. The other really key things in that consultation are around the MLA. So what we strongly feel actually is that the ability for the industry to have one way of agreeing this, so one a binding set of agreements which helps everybody to move quickly, so that we don't have just perhaps one bank moving, or have the difficulty of multiple very different contracts and slowing us all down. So we're also consulting on the need for whether there multilateral arrangements need to be in place, and then Thirdly, and outside of the consultation, we really don't want to lose momentum. So we really want these implementation groups to continue. So we want both OBL and Pay UK to really keep running hard at the functional capabilities and the need for dispute resolution processes, which we think need to happen outside, outside of anything that comes out of the consultation. One of the other key questions in the consultation is whether we should mandate participation. And this is a really important question, because actually, there are several different ways that you could organise to get momentum going. And we have suggested mandating the CMA9. And we are expecting to have a debate about this. So we welcome views on that particular point, whether mandation is necessary or not necessary, and whether there are different groups of people that should be mandated, or whether the CMA9 is a good group to mandate.
Great. So Stephen, you've obviously read the consultation, but would you like to expand on what Kate has just said and give us your thoughts on pricing principles and the commercial model and everything that was just mentioned?
I think Kate has kind of outlined it's the start of a debate, and I think there are some key things here. So on the kind of commercial model and pricing principles, I think there needs to be a kind of decision made around whether the commercial model is going to be different for phase 1, phase 2, and for different use cases. Because at the moment, the commercial model proposed in the consultation isn't sustainable as you start to look at other use cases, and might not even be sustainable for the low-risk use cases for phase 1, because I think there are other costs that haven't been included, and those costs will definitely be larger as you go into other use cases. So when you start to look at the cost of actually handling disputes, customer queries, when you look at the costs of customer education, staff education as well, and ultimately you are going to need to invest in a compelling customer experience for VRP and account-to-account payments. That's the only way it will compete with cards, and establish payment methods that have Apple Pay and PayPal and other ways of simplifying the journeys. And it needs to be at that kind of level for customers and merchants to adopt it, because as well as the participants on this call investing in VRP, you've actually got to persuade merchants to switch their payment integration from direct debit or from card payment gateways, etc. And that's a challenge in themselves, because like all companies, it's a prioritization call on what's the business case. So I do think that compelling customer experience is key. And also think on the question of mandation, I do think there needs to be a mandatory stick in there. I think it needs to be on a broader base than just a CMA9, because the CMA9 are not the whole market by any stretch of the imagination. And you've got some large players outside the CMA9 that, if customers are going to have true choice, you would want to mandate them. And perhaps a better approach is to threaten mandation to encourage the industry to go and do it, rather than just go and say you're going to be mandated, because that gets a different behavior and a different reaction from people. It's just a thought.
Yeah, thanks. We've also got a question from the audience about phase 2 that says there's huge workload, and what is the structure in place that we have to ensure rigid implementation? Maybe that's a question for Kate. Jane.
If I'm understanding the question right, phase 2 is kind of what we're doing now, is that right? Or do they mean phase 2 of VRP?
It did not specify.
Let's assume it's phase 2 of what JROC is doing. So I think, and if it's not, please shout. But no, JROC is still sitting, and I don't know how Jane feels about it, but I feel like JROC is sitting quite regularly and in fact, probably more frequently than it used to, because there is a lot of things for JROC to talk about. So that governance is still in place. That joint regulatory oversight remains tracking all of the work streams that were talked about that Jane mentioned and that Henk followed up on as well. So we're keeping an eye on the momentum on everything. We are also, from a regulatory perspective, keeping a really close eye on how the implementation momentum is going. So what that means is how Pay UK and OBL are taking forward the groups to think hard about the implementation. So there is a governance structure in place. It's close to all our hearts, and we're keeping a close eye on activity. I don't know whether Jane wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, Jane.
Kate, I think you've covered it really. JROC is there providing that oversight of all the work streams. It is sitting frequently, and yes, we're very busy trying to get all the work streams to progress in the right way and making sure that it's all happening as it should.
Great, thank you. And thanks for the audience for participating as well. Now let's move on to another very hot topic, which is the future entity. So I think that's a question for Henk. Could you please provide us with an update on the OBL matter?
Yeah, so we are, first of all, there's a lot of BAU we need to look at, of course, as well in terms of the day-to-day running. So we need to maintain the standards, whether this is future entity or not. And one of the things we will do this year is, of course, have another standards release, because we need to be up to date with the latest technology, but also protocols like ISO and FAPI and etc. So there's a lot of work to be done, whether it's in future entity or not. So next to a lot of JROC work, we still consider this as being under the order. I think in terms of future entity, what we would like to see is, of course, what I would call joining the dots. So coming back to the analogy of the Christmas Carol is to ensure that the past, which is the order and still the order in the future too, but also the present, which might be becoming the transitioning, then is joined up with the future, which is actually what we mentioned before. And this might be also an opportunity to introduce, of course, things beyond open banking, other data sets through the DPDI bill and what we discussed before. There was an APPG this week on open banking with the minister, and we discussed there whether or not we could have an ordering of different sectors. So what would be the next sector in the smart data? So I'm a member of the Smart Data Council. OBL is a member as well, and we are trying to look at what's the future of trust frameworks, what's the future of other data sets, what would be the next data set, and what would we require in terms of capabilities in the future entity as well to accommodate for that, which is a very pertinent question, of course, when you talk about the future entity in terms of what should it do. And that is, I think, our belief as well, that it should be having schemes, or rule books or standards at least. I don't know if you noticed, but we heard this week that there might be a mandation on fuel to retailers to share in the future fuel prices in their forecourts. The question is, how are we going to deal with that when that happens? So you need standards, you need minimum standards, you need a trust framework, you need engagement of ecosystems, you need to ensure that everybody follows the rules, etc. So I think the future entity, and this is particularly where Treasury comes from as well, in terms of the long-term regulatory framework, will embed then the management, design and management of different schemes. And that could be TRIs, what we're doing already today. So we would have a look in our transition process, how we move that into the future entity. That could, and it's not up to me to decide that, could, for instance, be also the scheme of VRPs in the future going forward, the management of that. And it also could embed cross-functional capability, like dispute management and other functionalities going forward, which you would need for many data schemes anyway. So we are going to, when we design a future entity, it will be a no-regrets development, so that in a modular way, at least you could slot in other data sets, which would then work also on the principles, the original initial principles of open banking. And that's the reason why we are They are strong principles which work, which are safe, of course, and which are scalable as well. As Kate was mentioning at the very beginning, tapping into that huge potential, but it needs to be scalable, sustainable, and safe. And these three principles need to be also in the future entity in order to build out for future data sets as well. The reason I'm saying this is also because we need interoperability at a certain point between those schemes. And that's why it's important that the future entity look at that from the outset.
Great. Would anyone else on the panel like to expand on this and share their views or expectations on the future entity?
So let me jump in, because last year I chaired the Future Entity Working Group where we've done a lot of work. JROC is considering what the next steps are, and JROC's recommendations for the future entity. And as I said earlier, that's due Q1 this year. I hope during the course of this year that we can really make progress on this, because we need this to be ready for the future. And as Henk says, it needs to be scalable to other data sets and other industries as they come into open finance as well. So I think this is going to be the year where we make progress on the future entity.
Great, thank you. And unless anyone else wants to jump in, we've got another question from the audience. Again, zooming back in on VRPs. Why do they actually present a real alternative to customers? What's the one thing? Maybe Kat, you want to answer that one? We haven't heard from you in a little while.
Yeah, so I'll cover a few things, and I'll definitely jump over to Stephen because he'll have a lot of interesting views on this as well. So I think VRPs, specifically commercial VRPs, so the ones that are covered by the open banking order, so the ones that we're really focusing on in that the PSR and people like Stephen have been doing a lot of work on recently, they really kind of provide that option for a competitor to credit card. So an alternative option for us at the checkout to pay with something else. It's really kind of the first time we've seen in the last probably 50 years where we are getting presented with this alternative option. So it's really designed also to, again, kind of encourage customers to really engage with their payments and have that optionality to make a decision, to think about purchasing something before they actually go ahead and purchase it. So it's really kind of changing the way that people are interacting with their payments and making them and almost forcing them in a consumer positive way to really think about how they want to kind of be savvy with their finances. But I'll turn to Stephen because he'll have definitely more detailed views on that question.
Great, thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Kat. I think the two words that come to mind for me are kind of control and security. I think if you compare this to some other payment methods, such as card on file, direct debit, continuous payment authority, BRP gives the customer control. They can actually cancel the direct debit, the VRP. One proposal I think we need to consider in future is being able to edit a VRP mandate down the line as needs and the proposition changes, potentially. But on the security side, the customer there's notifications in place, so customer knows when their account is being debited. I think we should, or has been debited, I think a useful feature to add in would be to give that pre-notification that the debit is coming. But they have the security of knowing that payment is virtually instant. So it's gone out of the account. So when they go into mobile banking, they've got a realistic view of their balance position. They're not waiting for 3-day, 4-day pending transactions from cards.
Great. So to end this panel, I was going to ask you all the same question, and I was going to ask you to find or identify one key priority milestone that you're looking forward to seeing this year or in the future. But we've also got a great question from the audience, so I'm going to merge the two and ask you to give me one milestone you're looking forward to, and then a kind of more existential question. How do you think that the history books will remember JROC, or maybe what do you hope will be remembered? Let's start with Jane, who kicked off the panel with the fireside chat.
Now that's a really excellent question, as how you want the history books to remember JROC. I don't know the answer. I hope as the committee that really drives forward and sets the foundations for the success of open banking for the future. Now, what milestone am I keen to this year? I'm going to repeat what I've already said. It's got to be, I think, the future entity, because I think once that's up and running and that the plans are progressing, then that will be the centre of the open banking ecosystem for the future. And then when we have other industries and other data sets docking into it, I think it will hopefully set the foundations for success for the future.
Perfect. Kate, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah. So I like Jane. I would like JROC to be remembered as the really, helpful guiding hand in getting us to the right place for a sustainable future for open banking. That's not easy, right? Because sometimes we get feedback that we go too fast and people need more time. Sometimes we get feedback that we go too slow. Sometimes we get feedback that, we're not thinking about everything in the right order or in the right way. But, somebody somewhere has got to lead this, and it's difficult. And JROC has stepped into that breach. And so it's a really important role, and one that we are joined together with a commitment to make that work. So hopefully history will remember that it wasn't easy, but that we got to a sustainable future. In terms of what I want this year, it's got to be VRP. And I'm just going to re-emphasize exactly what Kat and Stephen said earlier about VRP. If this year we can enable businesses to have a new way of taking payments, a new way that I think it was Kat that said, they've not had that for 20, 30, 40 years. A new way of taking payments that works for merchants or those businesses that we've talked about earlier, and that gives customers better control of their ability to pay. There are so many of sectors of society where that is such an important thing that is missing from their payments choice today. I think we will have done a brilliant thing if we get that available this year.
Great, thank you. And then same question to Hank, then we can go to Kat and Stephen and wrap up.
Thank you. Yeah, a great question on JROC to remember. And what we might forget perhaps in 2016 is CMA started this process as a regulator. Very, very commendable that without the regulator and now a whole team of regulators and the Treasury and JROC, very commendable to them. If they wouldn't have stepped up, there wouldn't be open banking. There wouldn't be better outcomes for consumers and SMEs and citizens. So again, JROC stepping up, that is for me the second kind of moment in history, I think, in open banking and anything open going forward. And particularly you've got all the government and the three regulators there to go to the next level and everything open. So that's very commendable, and that's how I will remember it. In terms of my wish list for this year, and particularly the milestone, I'm probably going to focus on, I think I'm not going to reiterate VRP because I think that's a very exciting prospect. Particularly, I think, we're 6 years young, but Visa is 66 years old. And that's how a new payment scheme was born at then. But that's we're talking only about a young industry now. But the one I would like to call out is particularly the continued collaboration in the ecosystem to get to a new sustainable funding and governance model, that we have that in place to agree and to get progress on non-order work, so that we don't talk about order and non-order anymore. We don't talk about the CMA 9 anymore. We just have an open conversation with the entire industry and we get on with it. That would be my immediate wish under the Christmas tree. Thank you.
I think for me, so trying to think. So I'll start with the JROC question first. So I think the history books will look at JROC as everyone has said, a very big industry collaboration with everyone who's participating in the open banking space, be it a mandated provider to a fintech trying to kind of expand and grow. It was a very big step on that. And it wasn't just, okay, respond to a consultation with your views. It was actually having open dialogues, open discussions. As everyone has said, sometimes difficult discussions and debates, but having those in a forum where actually people were taking notes and listening and coming together to present their views. I think that will definitely be a really valuable learning tool for us in the future. I think it also will be an interesting way to understand. So in the UK and Europe, we took a very regulatory approach. It was very prescriptive. And we're now kind of looking at understanding that other countries around the world have not taken that approach. They've really taken that more market-led approach. So to me, this is the UK kind of going a little bit towards a market-led approach by really listening to the market and what the market actually wants, and then taking that feedback and using it to build the next phase. And then I think for 2024, the biggest thing that we're looking forward to is the DPDI bill. For us, that will really bring out the clarity and help us as we start to plan for open finance, be it if we're going to be focusing on things like the pension dashboard, if that's going to be mentioned in there, and pensions is going to be a sector that's going to be kind of the next focus, or if it's going to be something else like mortgages or something like that. So that's the really big thing that we want, is just that clarity and helping us to kind of build our strategy for the next few years for open finance.
I'm going to be controversial and say I don't think the history books should actually remember JROC, other than the American singer-songwriter, who, of course, I hope does have a legacy. I think what should be remembered is really the advent of a kind of sustainable and secure data sharing economy in the UK, and how that drives innovation and growth and kind of benefits to consumers and businesses. To the people in the wider world, JROC is just a, what's that? It's we tend to live in a bubble. I think in terms of, people have mentioned many of the things I would say are key milestones for next year, but I'm going to add a further one. I would like to see at least the beginning of a conversation on what a compelling kind of customer experience around data sharing looks like, and a kind of sustainable economic model for it.
Great. And I guess that question on how history will remember JROC is also one for me as a journalist. And I just want to reiterate to everyone and the audience that I'm always keen to hear from you and hear, if you want to flag anything interesting that's happening in the space, let me know, and I'm very easy to reach. And on that note, I'll hand it back to Helen, who can give us her parting words.
Akila, thank you. And you're new to open banking, so I would also like to reinforce that to all of the industry. Absolutely fabulous to have another female in the industry, and I can absolutely guarantee that everybody on this panel has enjoyed working with you, but also I am sure we'll be inviting you out for a coffee to talk with you more. So thank you, Akila. Superbly hosted. And thank you, everybody on the panel. It does surprise me, Stephen wanted to be controversial. There's another way to start the year. Absolutely wonderful. I, for one, are going to be re-listening to that because it was absolutely jam-packed with information. So I will be re-listening tomorrow on my turbo trainer, and I would invite the audience to do that, not necessarily on your turbo, but to re-listen to it and to share it. I have been receiving, and I'm just counting them now, it's about 25 different WhatsApp messages, literally from different countries around the world. So as soon as this goes out online, it will be shared across all of our channels. And we will be editing parts, and we will edit it. So there's some key takeaways. So we'll do some clever things with it so people can digest it. So all that remains is for me to again thank the team, because I know how much my team work hard to create this type of conversation, and I know that behind every person on this panel there is a team of people that have worked very, very hard to make this come together. It doesn't just happen. To find time in busy people's diaries and to have everybody prepared. So for all the people that you don't see, I want to give them a little bit of a shout out as well. So Akila, you're very, very welcome to come back anytime, as is every one of the guests. And my last thank you would go to Kaylee, who without this just doesn't happen. And quite frankly, a lot of things at OBE doesn't happen. So thank you very much, Kaylee. All that remains is to thank you, the audience, for watching. And I can't wait to see your comments and to see you all next time. Thank you very much. Take care. Goodbye.